The most popular street food in Rome is Pizza al Taglio, which translates to pizza by the cut or pizza by the slice. Along the streets, you'll find dozens of pizzerias with these big rectangular squares of pizza lined up side by side with a variety of toppings. And today, Bridget is going to make Pizza al Taglio for us.
I sound so, I don't know, dangerous. Yes, we're gonna make one of the best pizzas out there, as you mentioned, Pizza al Taglio. And the crust is what makes this so different. It's very similar to Sicilian pizza. It's baked in a big pan, but it has almost a focaccia-like feeling to it. It's got this lacy open holes and smaller holes, and the bottom gets nice and crisp. So we're gonna make a great version here today, starting with the dough. Bread flour is what we want here. It has a higher protein content, so that is going to help us create more gluten. So this is 14 2/3 ounces. Always a good idea to weigh it out, but it's about 2 2/3 cups of bread flour. Now to that I'm going to add a teaspoon of instant yeast. You could also use rapid rise yeast. We'll just whisk this together. So next, water. This is 1.5 cups or 12 ounces of water, and this is room temp. And 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. So I'll just mix this in. It looks kind of stiff at this point, but you'll see later on it'll start to loosen up. And what I'm looking for is this to come together into a shaggy mess and just no dry pockets of flour at this point. So this is all mixed up. I'll put a little piece of plastic on it. We're gonna leave this here for about 10 minutes. And during this time, it's the magical time of Autolyse. Autolyse is when enzymes are formed and they break down these little balls of protein that are in the dough and break them apart into smaller pieces so it's going to be easy to manage later on.
Okay,
All right.
let it relax.
We've accomplished Autolyse. That was a good 10 minutes. Take off the plastic. I'm going to reuse that in just a second. Now, this is 1 1/4 teaspoons of table salt. So I'll just mix this in as best as I can. And this is going to get mixed up a little later too. But we're not using a mixer at all because mixers don't develop enough gluten and they create a crumb that's just too fine. So we like that shaggy, irregular crumb. All right, so this is going to go back on this piece of plastic and now we're going to let it rest. It's going to be a good 20 minutes. All right, 20 minutes later, and you can see that the dough is starting to smooth out a little bit. We're gonna fold it. So I've wet my hands here. I'm gonna pull up one side and then start to bring it to the middle. I'll turn the bowl about 90 degrees, and I'll do the same thing. And anytime my hand starts to get a little bit sticky, I'll just dip it right back in the water. So we're gonna go around the bowl a total of 6 times. I'm going to put a piece of plastic back on it. Now we're going to let this sit for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to go back in there and do the same thing with wet hands, start to fold it again. Now at that point, I might find that the dough is just starting to feel a little tighter. So I might only get 3 times around the bowl instead of a total of 6 turns, but anywhere from 3 to 6 turns is great. Then after that, plastic goes back on in 10 minutes before we move on.
Okay.
All right, so again, this was after the second series of folds and we let it rest for another 10 minutes. Now, we're gonna get this out of the bowl. Now I've got here a baking pan, a 13 by 9 inch baking pan. The dough is going to go right in there. And once it's in there, I want you to feel this dough.
Wow, you can't even touch it.
I know.
I almost have to slap it or else it'll stick to me.
Well, don't slap it. What did it do to you? But you can see it's all relaxed. It's very supple. I went ahead and I sprayed this baking pan with vegetable oil spray. I'm going to spray the top of this as well. And I'm going to use my fingertips to start to dimple this out into about a 10 by 7 inch oval, roughly. Again, we're just starting the coaxing process here. If it starts to snap back a little bit, you know what, just listen to it. So now I want to put it on a piece of plastic. This is just the easier way to wrap, connect it on top, nice and tight at this point. I'm just gonna set this aside for a moment because we're gonna make our sauce. This is a 14.5 ounce can of whole tomatoes that we've drained. That way we can get rid of all the liquid and we don't have to pre-cook it. And I've got a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. Got 2 anchovy fillets. This is a teaspoon of dried oregano, a half a teaspoon of table salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. All right, lid goes on. We're gonna process this until the sauce is nice and smooth. It's gonna take about 30 seconds. Enough of that. I'm gonna get this out of the blender, put this into the fridge and let it chill just until you use it. And this could actually go into the fridge and stay in there for 2 days. If you wouldn't mind covering that with plastic.
Sure thing.
And the dough is also going to go into the fridge for at least 16 hours, but up to 24 is great.
Okay.
All right, so here's what the dough looks like after about 24 hours.
Wow.
Now we want to start working it into this pan, but again, this pizza, one of the hallmarks is it's sort of like focaccia. It gets that almost fried crust from lots of good olive oil. So I'm gonna paint the top of this with 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. Now I'm going to invert this onto this pan. And this is why we didn't start to form the dough right in that rimmed baking sheet. If we had started it with all that olive oil on the bottom, by the time that we got to this point, a lot of that oil would have been soaked into the dough itself.
Aha.
So by leaving it on there, it's going to help to fry the bottom of the dough.
All right.
So now we're going to start to dimple this just with our fingertips into about a 15 by 11 oval. We're going to start working it towards the sides at this point. Not even going to attempt the corners. So that's looking good. Starting to work it out, coaxing it gently. We're going to spray this with a little bit more vegetable oil spray. We're just going to cover it loosely with a little bit of plastic wrap. And now this is going to sit right on the counter until it starts to get a little bit bubbly, a little bit puffier. And that's going to take about an hour, maybe up to an hour and a quarter. All right, so you can see that dough's gotten a little bit puffy. It's been about an hour. So at this point, I'm going to start working from the inside out and pushing it to the edges and into the corners. If it was starting to snap back, cover it again for another couple minutes if necessary, but really, I mean, that's pretty darn good. All right, now this is a 1/2 cup of the sauce we made earlier. It makes more than a 1/2 cup, but you can actually freeze the rest of it for up to 2 months.
Oh, very clever.
We're going to drizzle it right over the top. I'm going to use the back of a spoon and just spread this out into a very thin veneer. All the way to the edges, because again, this is pizza by the cut, so every piece has to be saucy. A little bit more extra virgin olive oil. And that's a tablespoon to drizzle right over the top. And this is just really gonna keep the top nice and rich and help with browning as well. So I'm gonna use the back of my spoon, gently over the sauce right on top.
The one thing I don't see out here is cheese.
Usually, if there's any sauce, it goes without any cheese on top.
Interesting.
Yes. All right, so that looks beautiful. All right, and this is going to go into a fairly hot oven, 450 degrees. I've also moved the rack all the way down to the bottom, and that's important. We actually don't need a baking stone because of that. This pan is going to be really close to the heat source. There's all that oil underneath the dough. It's going to fry the bottom and get really good and brown. So that's going to go into the oven, and we're going to leave it in there for about 20 to 25 minutes until the top starts to get nice and golden brown. And about halfway through baking, I'll go in there and I'll rotate the pan.
Ooh.
Ha 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 ha. Oh, you can really smell that sauce. Now, before we move it and cut it, I need to let it cool in this pan for about 5 minutes, so hands off.
Okay.
It's eating time.
All right.
Almost. Got to get it out of the pan, so I'm going to take a knife and just release it from the sides anywhere it looks like it's touching the sides of the pan. So I'm going to bring this up here, and I like to use an offset spatula for this. It just gets under very easily and slide it right out, just like that. So we're going to top this with a really fresh topping. This is 4 ounces of baby arugula. We're going to dress this arugula with a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil, almost like a salad on top of our pizza. The pizza is still warm, so it's going to wilt the arugula just a little bit and start to release some of that peppery flavor. Now, I do need to cut the pizza before I add the arugula.
Before adding the toppings.
You would cut and crush the arugula. No good.
Makes sense.
So we're going to cut this into 8 pieces. Right? Arugula goes right on the top. Scatter it all the way to the edges. Again, you want every bit to be evenly covered. It's just so nice and fresh, and it's beautiful. So next, fresh mozzarella. This is whole milk fresh mozzarella, 8 ounces. We've torn it into bite-sized pieces. So we're going to scatter this on top as well, and quite a bit of it. Finally, Parmesan, and this is Parmigiano Reggiano. It's 1.5 ounces.
That turned a corner right there at the end in terms of looks.
So Julie, this is pre-cut.
Ooh, I'm gonna go for this corner edge because it's closest.
There you go.
Oh yeah. That's delicious.
All about that crust.
The flavor of that crust is so deep and hearty.
I love that crispness from all that olive oil. It all pays off here.
I like this as a change of pace from your average pizza. The sauce, like you said, it's intensified.
And the arugula is just right, especially with all that peppery bite. Just softened just a little bit.
Bridget, this is delicious. Thank you.
Prego.
So if you want to make this classic Roman-style pizza, mix together a very wet dough using bread flour, instant yeast, and a little olive oil. Fold the dough a few times to develop the gluten, and let it rise slowly in the refrigerator. Make a no-cook sauce using the blender and canned whole tomatoes. About an hour before baking, transfer the dough to a greased rim baking sheet and stretch it into shape. Top with sauce and a little olive oil before baking, and finish with fresh arugula and some cheese. From America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, a killer recipe for Pizza al Taglio. Thanks for watching America's Test Kitchen. What'd you think?
Well, leave a comment and let us know which recipes you're excited to make, or you can just say hello.
You can find links to today's recipes and reviews in the video description.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
See you later.
I'll see you later.